In the immediate aftermath of the ELEAGUE Majors finals, there was a tweet made by Jason Moses O'Toole, or just Moses, which read, "Please every major with 1 month break beforehand. Level of competition was unreal this time around," which is a pretty common, popular opinion. It was a very popular tweet, lots of retweets. It was posted to Reddit, and I think it got over like 2,000 upvotes. It was a very popular idea. So, yeah, I didn't really think much of it at the time, but I got this message yesterday. Some guy, never heard of him, he's a nobody, just replied to that tweet with my name. He just put my at Wallaby Beetle, and he said CC. So I guess he wanted me to look at this. I was thinking about it, and I was trying to figure out why I asked me to answer. I think it's because of this thing I said in this article, "Don't overrate the major." And in that article, there's this point where I just sort of said, it wasn't a big part of my argument, but I just said there's this idea that the more weight that goes into a major or a tournament, the more prep time you have, the better you're going to perform. And that's the same sort of idea presented by the Moses tweet. But I said in response to that sort of common idea that there's actually two results that point to the opposite direction. After SK took that extended break because of Fur's medical issue, they didn't come back as the world's best team. They were definitely an elite team. They were top 4, top 2 at every single tournament they attended, but they weren't winning anymore. And other teams like Virtus.pro, I think, and then Astralis later, very much you could say had better results, and they were the best team in the world. Maybe Virtus.pro only as a placeholder. And then Virtus.pro themselves, they sort of took that break and then only made top 8 at ELEAGUE Season 2, and then they took that other sort of forced break because of the holidays, and then didn't do well at WESG. So that's sort of my argument, like sort of counterpoint. But I even said, that's a really small sample size. I don't know how much you can take off of that. But so I was thinking about this yesterday and today. I was thinking maybe I should sort of try to play devil's advocate again, sort of argue against an idea that I'm not sure I agree with. So just sort of go against in the opposite direction every argument made by this idea that breaks are better, that having that 1 month breaks is going to increase level of competition. So I guess the first place to start would be talking about that claim. General level of competition was raised. I think this tweet was made, in the immediate aftermath of the finals. I think that's why it was so popular, that the idea that the level of competition was super high, because the finals were so amazing. I think most people would say that's the best of 3 in CSGO yet. I mean, I think Thorn said that in the immediate aftermath of the game as well. I mean, no, it's obviously a great series. I mean, I can't think of a finals I would put over that. I mean, it's fantastic, really entertaining, really back and forth. What's the highest level? I mean, Device didn't show up in the last 2 maps, and he's a superstar. So what does that say when the team who wins superstar doesn't show up, but they still win? Does that mean? I mean, they're clearly not playing at their peak. Their hard carry is actually slumping and performing sort of like low in comparison to those teammates. But I mean, no, it was a great finals. I can see what, lots of great plays, really decisive calling. I mean, it was a great finals. But for the rest of the tournament, you sort of have to make this like sweeping generalization that the level of play is higher, and I'm not sure I'm comfortable doing that. I don't consider myself an expert in the game. So it's hard for me to say, like, aim in general was 5% higher across all maps in comparison to X tournament. That's sort of, or tactics, or, it's hard, it's just hard to categorize 33 Swiss best of ones and the 7 best of threes and say that the level was X% higher or better than a different tournament. So that's difficult, but I thought maybe the better way of going about it would be to talk about some of these teams that took really extended breaks and then came to the tournament, because this should be like proof of concept. They took the really long break, so they should be especially better, right, after they come back, by this sort of logic that more breaks, they come at the peak form to the tournament, They got to be better. Okay, so the first one I will start with is the obvious one, which is Navi. So Navi, if you remember, had 2 really good results with the new simple lineup. They had the first place at ESL 1 New York and the top 4 at Epicenter, which is another really stacked tournament. But then they had 2 really bad results where they got grouped and looked really terrible. The thing about the Navi team is with simple, I mean, they on paper they should be the most skilled team in the world. It's just they have such insane talent on that team. But the problem with them is that Zeus is no longer in the lineup. That's who Simple replaced, and he used to be the in-game leader. He used to do a little in-game leading, but the Starks sort of did more, took more of the reins, sort of added to him, and then so they think they didn't need him anymore because they had Starks, and there was the coaching rule change, which prevents Starks from talking most of the time. So, yeah, that obviously hurts Navi a lot. And, something people noticed when they were at this wrong, they looked a lot weaker tactically. I mean, the skill was there, but they weren't strong tactically. And that's something people really went in on them on when they had 2 really bad results. They looked lost on the T sides in those last 2 tournaments. So I think because it was the order, right? That people had really low expectations for Navi going into the major because they did well the first 2, but the back 2 they didn't do as well. And their IEM Locan was especially, which was the last tournament mid-November before their long break, before the ELEAGUE. It didn't look especially good at all. So it was pretty bad. So they look very much better at the major. That's pretty undeniable. In the Swiss, they look great. They were super dominant, most dominant team of the Swiss, and they played 60 rounds. They won 48, 16 times 3 is 48, and they only lost 12, so that's averaging 4 round losses per map. So that's extremely dominant. But the thing is, I mean, when you look at those games, it's actually this weird pattern develops where they start every game on the CT side and don't play that many T rounds because they really do a good job of dominating those CT sides. And if you think about it, what's their strengths and weaknesses? They're a super skilled team, which is going to lend itself more to the CT side, but not a very tactically strong team, which lends itself to the T side. So maybe their weaknesses were sort of hidden there. I think that's a very fair criticism of how dominant are Navi really? Would they be more exposed if they played more T rounds? So that's sort of going against the idea that they're stronger. But I mean, they did look dominant. Then they of course played Astralis in the quarterfinals, which is the worst possible draw. They're the best team in the world. But let's talk about that series. So Overpass. It was Astralis stomping. They had a really good T side to start it, which versus Navi CT. So again, Navi didn't get to play a lot of T rounds on that map, as Astralis sort of won fairly early on. They did get to play a little, but then they go to Mirage, and that's where Navi made the best case for themselves. They won 9 T rounds in the first half. Astralis came back in the second half and made it 16-14, but Navi still won that. But the sort of counter argument to them doing really well on the T rounds on Mirage, which is a map Astralis doesn't play much, isn't especially known for, is Dust 2, where it's a very close game. But if you remember, towards the end of Dust 2, Navi started to make these very strange catwalk pushes. With limited utility, and they try to take those aim battles, and they sort of got corralled by the Astralis players, and it looked very odd and dysfunctional. And I think I'll even read a Moses tweet. I think it was a reply to Yanko. He was saying this is the crucial round, this decides the game, and then Moses responded extended and with a lot of A's, and Navi bust out the dog shit playbook, which is referring to the sort of weird catwalk pushes, 5-man catwalk pushes. So, I mean, are Navi especially better than they were before their 2-month break. I mean, it'd be nice to see them play a team other than Astralis. I mean, if they play Gambit or Fnatic, that could have been, you really could have seen them play more, and you would have liked to see them play more T rounds and really, get their medal challenged by a strong team like Virtus.pro on their T side. So it's sort of, I mean, I think it's definitely on it trends more towards the plus side for this idea that teams look better with the extended break, but this idea that they're way better, I think, has been over-exaggerated, and their strengths got exaggerated by sort of this lucky 3-to-1 CT to T ratio in the Swiss, and their weaknesses sort of got hidden by that sort of weird just coincidence that they got CT first 3 times. And then, also it's sort of a mixed bag in that quarterfinals with their T rounds. So, yeah, I think it's less positive than people are going to make it out to be. But I think, in general, you have to, sort of say, yeah, it still looks super dominant. And they still 3-0'd. And they had a really hard matchup. And they won T rounds in that on Mirage. So, yeah, I mean, maybe that's a positive, net positive. Okay, but let's go to Liquid. So, Liquid, after Simple left and they brought in Pimp, they looked okay. I mean, they didn't look especially good. I mean, they very frequently underperform online, which is a problem with them, which stopped them from getting to ELEAGUE Season 2. But they had a really pretty decent result. I mean, really, really decent, sort of a weird way of saying it. But they, had a good result in their first tournament together at ESL 1 New York. They made it through the Swiss. It was an 8-team Swiss. They won against G2 and Fnatic twice because it's an 18 Swiss. They can't have that stipulation where teams can't play each other, can't match up again, which is the stipulation that the ELEAGUE Major had. So that was pretty good. They lost to VP and Na'Vi in the groups as well, but those were the 2 finalists. And Liquid played Na'Vi in the semifinals and lost 2-1. So, I mean, still pretty decent. I mean, G2, Fnatic, they're top 10-ish teams at that time. Decent teams, good wins, decent wins, to use that word again. So, I mean, that's all right. But then they sort of had this really slump-ish period where they get grouped at the ESL Pro League Season 4 finals, and they were in that extremely weak group. There was that weird dichotomy between Group A and Group B at that tournament, if you remember, where the A teams were really weak and the B teams were super strong. Then they got grouped again at Northern Arena Montreal. Their group was Heroic, Envious, and Complexity. Heroic, I don't know if you ever... They had that little run in the immediate aftermath of the player break at the end of the summer. But I don't know if you ever call them top 10 team. There maybe at one point they were top 10-ish looking. Envious, they lost to Envious, and they didn't play Complexity. Yeah, I think that's what happened. But they didn't make it out of that group again, so it was sort of a weakish group again. Complexity, Envious, Heroic. Not especially good. Doesn't look like they're a great team if they can't make it out of that group. Then they got grouped again at IEM Oakland. They lost to Astralis Immortals G2. So Astralis, they sort of made the roster change by them, and Astralis crushed them 16-1. And then Immortals G2, they're more top 10-ish teams. Yeah, this is Oakland, so they didn't have Zeus anymore on Immortals. But yeah, Immortals, I think they're at like a top, maybe 12 would be a good spot for Immortals. G2 are always sort of hovering around 10. Yeah, I don't want to say top 10 for every single team, though. But yeah, still, that's probably more understandable. They didn't make it through groups there, but still not great. But then at the ELEAGUE Major, so this is the event. They had the long 2-month break. Their last event was at IEM Oakland. They went 2-3. 3 losses to the 3 teams I mentioned. And they go to the ELEAGUE Major, and it's another 2-3. They lost to Envy, FaZe, and Astralis, and they had the wins over Flipside and Mouse Sports. Their wins at I am Oakland were Navi and Tyloo. Okay, just in comparison. So yeah, I mean those look pretty similar results. It looks better than the when they got grouped out of their ELEAGUE major results looks better than Northern Arena and ESL Pro League, but very similar to Oakland and worse than New York. Worse, significantly worse, I would say. So yeah, no, I don't think a Liquid's, and they had the boot camp, and they brought in Zeus as a coach for their team. They had the boot camp in Europe, so they really went all out on that. So if that's a team, you definitely think, oh, they should have much better results. But I mean, I feel like that's a fairly typical result, and that's with ELEAGUE going off and having that crazy 85 kills in those first two games. They still didn't have, a super great results. It looks pretty standard for the sort of pimp era Liquid. I think that's a negative for this idea that teams look better after extended breaks. I mean, they definitely don't look better. So, I mean, they don't look worse, but I still think it's a negative for the argument, if you understand what I mean. Okay, let's look at another team. Okay, Virtus.pro is another team that people will say they looked really great at this tournament. They were so close to winning the finals. I mean, Astralis made that miraculous comeback on Train. I mean, that was VP's map to win. But they just didn't. Astralis had that great comeback. So, VP had these long extended breaks. They played like 2 tournaments in 3 months, and they had this really great ELEAGUE Major. So I think this is, if I said this just in a tweet, that it's not provable that extended breaks helps teams, people would say VP. But as I said before, they took the extended break in November, the month-long break. I don't know if you can call that extended, but it's a month long. So it's a pretty big break, which is the exact length of time Moses is calling for, a month break. And they didn't do well at ELEAGUE Season 2, I mean. They won ELEAGUE Season 1. And then they had those good runs, became the best team in the world. Took a month break after being the best team in the world to be super ready for ELEAGUE Season 2, which had a big prize pool, and they didn't do well. They came they finished in the top 8. They lost to FaZe in the quarterfinals, and FaZe wasn't established at the time at all. Then they had that other sort of forced vacation in the second half of December, early January because of the holidays, and then they went to WSG, and they didn't do well again. They lost to Kingwood in the semis, and that was another big money tournament. So that's, I already said this, I know, but so they didn't do well after the breaks, and the immediate after the max of the breaks. They did well in the week between WESG and ELEAGUE finals. They had a week break, and then they had their best result. They never took a break and then had a good result. It's the opposite. They took a break, had a bad result, then had a small break, a week. They did all that traveling, then went to the major and had a huge result. Had a really, really strong result, could have won the tournament. So that's definitely a negative in my mind, this argument that teams look much better after they take extended breaks. So that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think Virtus.pro is a name you could pick at all. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, another team people will say is Dignitas North, and North didn't take an extended break after ECS Season 2. It was only a month. That was the last tournament before sort of the holiday break. But their team, who a lot of people will cite as having problems because they were traveling too much, the famous thing was they won Epicenter and then had to do a 3 days worth of travel to Brazil to play in the ESL Pro League Season 4 finals. And then they got grouped. And then Magus Boy also had the food poisoning. So they just, and then they travel out. They went to a lot of tournaments. I think they were probably the most consistent team, along with SK, about attending tournaments sort of that November, December, October period. But they won Epicenter, right? They won Epicenter over VP, and people thought like, oh, they arrived. They had this really talented group of 4. They have MSL, who's really great, Danish in-game leader. It's a very tactical team, very skilled team. But then they didn't have those good results. They got grouped at ESL Pro League Season 4 with the short travel and the sickness. They got grouped again at DreamHack Winter. They made it through the groups at ELEAGUE Season 2, but they got quarterfinals finished. They lost to SK. SK was an elite team at the time. They still had FNX in the lineups instead of Fox. So, I mean, that loss is understandable, but they haven't arrived as an elite team yet. And they got grouped again at ECS Season 2, but that's when they had Valde in the lineup instead of Magisboy, who had exams. So, they had a good Epicenter win, all these bad results, and now they finally have the opportunity to rest. That's what everyone's saying. That's the excuse that people are giving. I think that excuse is valid for the Epicenter to ESL Pro League Season 4, but it starts to get less valid tournament after tournament. But this was their chance to come back at the ELEAGUE Major and show sort of their Epicenter level again, and see if when the excuse is sort of removed, if they can perform again. Because they should, on paper, perform. I mean, it seems like they have all the tools, right? They have the lineup and they have the tactics. But at the major itself, I don't think they were especially impressive. They got out of the Swiss, but I think if you look at it, they actually had the weakest schedule of all teams. Maybe not the weakest, but they had a very weak schedule. Okay, let's look at it. They lost to Gambit and Fnatic, which, okay, they made the playoffs. But I think people would say Fnatic and Gambit were the two weakest teams in the playoffs, or among the two, like top or bottom three, top three weakest teams, bottom three teams in the playoffs. I mean, Fnatic made the semifinals, but they beat Gambit. So I don't think people would point those teams out as being especially good. North lost to them, but their wins were over three teams who did not qualify for the playoffs. Hellraisers, G2, Godsend. Hellraisers were a team coming in where people had no expectations. They didn't accomplish much at the ELEAGUE Major either. They lost their first 3 games immediately. Hellraisers and Flipside were the first 2 teams to be eliminated. G2 had a rough schedule. They played Astralis and Virtus.pro like Optic did. So, I mean, I think, G2 were a team. I think Thorn even picked them. He did that video where he predicted them to get out of the groups. I mean, they're sort of like there's the 7 teams that people agreed upon would be get through, and then everyone was sort of played around with the 8th, and I saw in predictions. I think G2 is a reasonable pick to be like that 8th team. North did beat G2. I mean, but that's not... G2 only did go 1-3 in the end of the day. They also beat Godsend, which is another team people had no expectations for. Godsend sort of overperformed the tournament. They beat Optic and Astralis. But, it's another team I don't think people are going to call out as Godsend as being an especially strong team. They didn't... I think that they did practice, but the thing is, I think they said, or JW said in an interview, that they didn't do team practice. They did like individual practices to increase their individual level, because that was what was lacking on the team. They couldn't just do tactics alone and expect to win. So, I mean, they looked better at that tournament, but they didn't really practice. And that's also a thing about the Fnatic is they didn't, people said they just played FPL, they didn't practice either. So, yeah, the 3 wins, Hellraisers, G2, Godsend, none of those stand out as being especially good. G2 and Godsend are decent, but I think if you look at everyone else's schedule, or most teams' schedules, they always have to face like a SK or an Optic, not Optic's a bad example, Astralis or a VP or an SK or a Navi who was dominant, right? So I really do think North getting into the playoffs wasn't a huge accomplishment. They did play Virtus.pro in that first round, and they won that first game. No, they didn't win the first game. They won the second game on cash. They lost in a blow-up in the first game on Overpass, and Overpass was North's map pick, right? So that's sort of really embarrassing. Now, cash is an interesting pick because that's not a VP like standard map in recent memory. And I think it was picked it was sort of an interesting pick. I don't know if it was a good pick. I think that was a pick that was criticized a lot. North did win it 16-12, and then they lost the Map 3 Decider 16-13. I mean, Virtus.pro is a really good team at that event, obviously. I don't know how many, like their real accomplishment was winning cash over VP at the tournament, and that I don't know how big of an accomplishment that is. So to say North looked improved, I think that's another wash. I don't think they looked particularly better. They didn't get grouped, which is nice. They had a very easy schedule, and they didn't accomplish anything in the quarters. I don't think a win over VP on cash is much to brag home about. I mean, they did get VP, which is a rough break, just like Navi did. They got like a rough opponent in the first round of the playoffs, but I think it's a wash. I don't think it's a sign that teams improve via extended breaks or just a break, a month-long break. Okay, and the last team I think people would say was Gambit, and that's sort of one that it's hard to... I mean, they did lose a Fnatic who didn't practice in the quarters, so how good can they be? And then Hobbit was sort of hyped up as a really like at the next star, but it was more like Dren. Dren had a fantastic tournament. Really, I think he went off in the Swiss and in the playoffs in their Fnatic series. But yeah, they looked better. I think that's a team you could obviously say that's a plus. I think you can confirm they did win DreamHack winner. Gambit did. But I think people weren't expecting much from Gambit. That was another team people would sort of put on the outside of that 8. Like I said, 8 slot is like the maybe team. So getting through is like, yeah, I think that is a good accomplishment. I do think Gambit stylistically looked better. They looked like very much like the old Navi. I know that's a comparison people made a lot, but I think it's true. They with that slow style where they execute really late with a lot of map control. No, I think Gambit looked better. I think that is a plus. But overall, I think like that's the biggest plus that you can make for the argument that teams looking better after extended breaks. Yeah, so plus on Gambit, like not as big as plus as people want to argue on Navi. I think a negative on North and Liquid. So that's sort of the teams with extended breaks. Yeah, we can go. I don't want to go every single team. But I'm not sure I see the evidence for this idea that teams look especially better and the level play was higher with a break. And I think, well, like I alluded to before with the practicing with Godsend and Fnatic, those teams aren't going to be together anymore. I mean, DK, yeah, I know that might not happen. I think it's pretty solid that's going to happen. DK has a pretty good track record. That those teams are going to merge, so they might not have been practicing as much because they're dead teams. Same thing with the French teams, and then Mouse Sports also did this move in the middle of the finals to sort of hide it, I guess, where they replace Chris J with Oscar. So a lot of teams are, I don't know, like a lot of teams were ready to make roster moves. They just want to do that last tournament, and maybe they were already dead going into it. Oh, the other thing is Optic lacked a practice partner because Liquid went to Europe. So that sort of explains, well, I don't know if that completely explains their poor result. So a lot of teams looked a little weak, might have been weakened going into it. So I'm not ready to accept this idea that the level of play overall was higher. Okay, you're going to ask, like, well, it's so obvious. How could the level of play be lower if they have this month-long boot camp? You have to present a counter-argument. So I thought of 2 ideas for why extended breaks might not actually be completely helpful. Practice is obviously going to help. You think a practice team is going to help. But, okay, I have 2 reasons. The first reason is I think when you go extended periods of practice without a LAN to back up the knowledge, right, to confirm the ideas created in practice, that might lead teams askew. Okay, in League of Legends, there's this famous thing where teams in practice will play more aggressively. There'll be more skirmishes, so you don't have to play as strategically, which, like, might confuses teams when they go into the LAN or play offline because teams will play like pussies or whatever and not take as many skirmishes, so they have to play sort of a longer, more macro game, which sort of hurts the more skilled teams, right? And I think I haven't heard that exactly said in CS:GO. But I think that could be an idea. Like the skilled teams think like, oh, we'll just scrim and it'll be fine. But maybe at the major, when teams show up and they play more passively, they won't get all those free rounds where they just punish pushes or something. So that might be confusing. The obvious other things people like to bring up is that opping is stronger online, so that might confuse teams. They might think they're stronger on this map like Dust 2 because it's more op focused and they have a good opper and he's better with the op online, but when they get to LAN it might be different. There's also like the peeker's advantage and stuff like that with online play. So there's some stuff like that, but I also think like the map pool might also be a problem, because if you think, because of all those factors I mentioned before, that you might think you're better at some maps than you actually are via like on LAN. Like your online might be way better than your LAN, therefore you try to pick them and when they don't work on LAN. So I can think of a couple examples of this. First thing that comes to mind is when Astralis played TSM in ECS Season 1, which is like this really embarrassing loss because it's like this NA team who has like no talent or very limited talent. I mean, Sick is someone that people say have talent. It has a lot of talent, and Twist to a lesser extent. But they beat Astralis, who's like, and Astralis was formerly TSM. That was sort of an embarrassing loss. And what Astralis did is they played Kabul. It was the best of one. They vetoed down to Kabul. And I think what they said in interviews, like they knew TSM played Kabul and was good on Kabul. And if you remember, TSM sort of famously played a bunch of good or close Kabul games that tournament. But Astralis thought that they could play Kabul because of some online results, and Kirby, who was just added to the team, thought like that new addition thought they could start to play Kabul again, and they went to LAN, and then they lose to TSM, who's a nobody NA team. I mean, they got top 4 at that event, but I mean they just beat Astralis and Cloud9. That's not a super good result, and they never repeated that good result like that again. So that was an embarrassing loss. But the other one more recently that comes to mind is actually VP playing or trying to play Cash at the major, just this recent major. So I was looking at these map picks, and in the very first round, VP played Optic, and the vetoes were VP removed Overpass, Optic removed Nuke, Virtus.pro removed Train, Optic removed Mirage, VP removed Dust 2. So it was left with Cash and Cobblestone, right? And they played Cobblestone, and VP won. So what's weird to me is that third ban, VP removed Train. Because VP could remove Cash there. Optic would remove Mirage because that's their permaban. VP last ban Dust 2, which is more or less their permanent ban. So they leave them with Train and Overpass. And at the tournament, you saw, I mean, over the course of the tournament, you saw that VP played great Train games. And they're sort of like really strong on Train when they were sort of like that placeholder #1 team in the world. So it's sort of bizarre that they wanted to leave Cash in the map pool there. I think even after in the post-game interview, Taz even said, like, oh, we knew it was going to come down to Cash or Cobblestone, so we were prepared to face Optic on those 2 maps, which is just so bizarre to me. Like, I mentioned before that North beat VP on Cash too. I mean, I don't think Cash was a strong map for VP. I know, okay, so we can go through the North game too. The pick ban was North removed Train, Virtus.pro removed Dust 2, North removed Overpass. Oh no, North picked Overpass. Virtus.pro picked Cash. Now they could have picked Nuke there, which is their best map, and like they're the best team in the world on Nuke. But they picked Cash. And then North removed Nuke the next one, and the VP removed Mirage, and then Cobblestone was left. Okay, so that was the maps for that series. It was Overpass, Cash, and Cobblestone. So when Thorin did the analysis on that, he thought it was VP just thinking like, oh, we got to pick to the team's weaknesses. But now I think about these 2 games, like VP trying to go to Cash versus optic, or 50-50 it because it's a randomizer for the last two in the best of one series between Cash and Cobblestone, and then they picked Cash against North, and they lost that game. They lost their own pick to North, which reminds me of VP picking Nuke versus SK at the ESL Cologne 2016 Major, right? So it's sort of a weird pick. Yeah, I think it's... But when I think about it, I think it's that VP honestly thought they could play Cash at this tournament. They thought it was, in some cases, preferable to their train if that team wasn't a Cash team. So I think they value it pretty highly, yet they didn't show any results on it. And I have to wonder, they took a pretty extended break, if that's because online they were doing really well on Cash. I know I'm sort of speculating here, but I heard these rumors that, like, oh yeah, VP were like crushing in scrims. I have to think that has some part of it. So I think that's an example. It might not be true, but an example of how a team could get misled by online and scrimming and playing too much online. Not too much, but playing a lot of scrims online matches, but not backing up on LAN because it's different. It's a slightly different game, and maybe they're not the greatest Cash team on LAN, which was proven. So I think that's a good reason for why playing like too long, maybe a month or two without a LAN, can be actually harmful or can have some negative effects. And the other reason I thought might be a problem to the level of play is that when you go an extended period without playing a LAN and you're playing against another team who hasn't played in a LAN in a while, it's essentially like a black box facing a black box. The pick ban might be weird because you might think like you have to go off scrims or something. Maybe they changed their pick ban. You also can't counter strat because you assume their strats are going to change. So level of play might be lower. You can't anticipate each other's moves. There's maybe less strategy involved between in-game leaders. Like, oh, I know that he tends to go here on this, so I'm going to make the hard read and stack this site. So maybe it's that. And just like, yeah, I mean, you might think that like, okay, well, if they don't know each other, it's going to be more about skill. And I think that's true to an extent, but if it's the highest level of play possible you're looking for a game, I think you do have to know the opponent. I was thinking about this like in chess. If you know that someone's going to do like the Sicilian in a specific line of the Sicilian, in your prep, you're going to look at that specific line and go like really deep into that line and like know like the positions at like 20, 15 moves like really deep, right? But if you've never played against someone, you don't know what they're going to do. You don't know what they're going to do, so you can't prep versus like their move, and you can't prep really deep into their moves. You can't think, okay, if they do X, then I do Y. If they do Y, then I do X. And then like there's like layers to that with the first, like there's, like each move. So if you sort of study an opponent, like, okay, if it's a 3v3 mid-round, they like to flank with cold zero or something. Like if you're playing against SK, like that's like the second layer. Like if they hit A, then have a 3v3, and then they're gonna flank with cold zero. So like and then if they flank with cold zero, he's gonna go around through connector or something. Well, you have all this knowledge, and there's like, okay, the first part is they're going to hit A, they hit A 85%, and then they're going to flank with cold zero, and then you think of like spots where it could hit, and then how do you counter that? You know this all in your head going into the match, right? And that's sort of lost if you just don't know what teams are doing anymore. I mean, I called SK sort of a black box in my last audio recording because they have the Fox edition, and then they also have this month long, so they could even change their map pool to change how they play. At the Major, you saw that Fallen's performance was very much hurt by the presence of Fox, it seemed. Fox took up opping roles even though Fallen was presumed to be the best op in the world still. So that's sort of like, it can be confusing. I think it limits like your ability to conceptualize your opponent's moves and prepare for them and then know what to do in response. It's more reliant on just aim battles and reactions rather than visualizations and counter strategies, which I think overall is a less interesting game to watch in a lower level of play. So that's sort of my arguments in general. I'm just sort of playing devil's advocate on this sort of common idea. If you disagree with me, just let me know. Compliments, complaints, send them on my Twitter. I'll read them. All right, that's it.